Hey, do you teach yoga? Have you ever trained to lead yoga classes, to be a yoga therapist? Have you ever owned a yoga studio? Maybe even just wondered what it was like for the women and men up there in front of the room on their mats, leading you through endless Surya Namaskars, down dogs, and pranayamas galore? Well, these are their stories, and mine. I'm Rebecca Sebastian, a 20-year yoga teacher, 10-year yoga therapist, yoga studio owner, and co-founder of a yoga-focused nonprofit. I've done a lot in the yoga world over the last 20 years. Pretty much everything except had a water cooler. You know, a place to share stories, talk about struggles, successes, and find other people who do the same thing that I do. Welcome to Working in Yoga, a podcast and substitute water cooler for yoga folks to connect and build community, to share our unique profession, our challenges, and our journeys with the world.
Hey friends, welcome to Working in Yoga. This week on the podcast, I have Per Erez talking about all things creativity, theater, jazz, and yoga teaching. So one of the things that comes up in this discussion that I love is how Per and I talk about how creativity is a cultivated skill. Forever, I think I thought that you had to be naturally creative in order for your output to count as something creative. I'm thinking of like my middle school art teacher, Mrs. Tobby, who took the opportunity to make me feel inadequate at my drawing at every conceivable turn. And funnily enough, it turns out that both my kids felt the same way about their elementary school art teacher, Mrs. Purcell. Not that I'm trying to call out these women for their teaching techniques, but I do think that we present creativity in a way that makes us feel like you're either naturally creative or not at all. And when we reward people who might have that natural talent for something, like I did when I was a kid for public speaking, say, we ignore the fact that getting good at anything, even things you're naturally good at, takes hard work and, frankly, the choice to cultivate a particular skill. So the moral, my friends, you are creative if you choose to be and you practice. You are a creative professional at yoga if you choose to be and you practice. It takes heart, curiosity, and as my guest for this week, Per and I talk about, a little bit of nerdy interest. I honestly think if I was making a yoga pro soup, those three things would be the staple ingredients. Now, before we begin, if you would do me the favor of liking or subscribing to the podcast from wherever you're listening from, I would be eternally grateful. And I'm also very grateful for our podcast sponsor, Offering Tree, both for supporting yoga pros who run businesses with some really rad software, but also our conversations here. Offering Tree actually supports so many podcasts that I love, like my friend Jeevan Heyman's Accessible Yoga podcast and my friend Michael J's podcast, Yoga Biz Champ, that they reminded me of that meme that's been going around recently for yoga folks. You know, the one that says use as many props as you need, and it's just this dude who stacks up 10 bolsters to do down dog. That's what Offering Tree is for us podcasters, the amazing stack of supportive bolsters. So thanks. We really appreciate you. Go ahead and go to the show notes and download Offering Tree's Yoga Studio Success Guide and experience their support for yoga folks firsthand. Okay, let's get into it, my friends. A creative conversation with Per Erez. Friends, welcome to Working in Yoga. Okay, I'm very excited about this conversation today. Let me introduce you to my new friend, Per Erez. Per, will you tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Certainly, Rebecca. So, who am I? I am, wow, that's a loaded question. Maybe I'll start with what I do. That'll be easier, I suspect. So I have, okay, maybe that's not so easy either. Okay, let's reframe it. So I have a background and I characteristically offer both group and private sessions. Those are based primarily in somatic education and yoga therapeutics. But I tend to think of myself as a consciousness-based movement educator. So my background's a little eclectic, as Rebecca and I've already discussed. So that includes a lot of different modalities and interest in numerous disciplines, including things like physical theater and forms of Asian dance and sound healing, I guess we could say. So yeah, that's enough to get us started, I think.
Ooh, okay. So it really is because here's what I want to ask you. There is a bit of you will see a slide of people who have movement education outside the yoga space, whether some sort of dance or physicality, and then they find their way into yoga as part of that sort of like creative experience. So can you tell me a little bit about how you got here?
Yeah, so I guess I would start with the theater component.
Yeah.
Very, very early in my life, uh, I was intensely shy, and I thought, okay, this is just I'm not comfortable being around other human beings. I feel very off-putting and off-put by other human beings. So uh, very early on, I took a couple of classes, and I found I had a knack for it, and it helped me incredibly because I didn't feel so self conscious all the time being around other human beings, which,
Yeah.
you're going to wind up being around other human beings. That's a part of the way life works. So you got to figure it out. And performance and theater really helped me address some of the anxiety, I think, is really what it was that I had around being in my own body around other people. So that was where I started. And I began to discover for myself that there was a piece of me that never got performed, right? That was underneath the layers of this artifice that I was creating. And I began to explore that. And I've always been a huge nerd, just a huge nerd, if it doesn't come across already. Um, exactly.
Same,
So,
same.
yeah. Most creative people, at least in my experience, have a little bit of that theater geek nerd
Yeah,
aspect to them, even if
yeah,
they've never done theater, right?
yeah.
It's just family knows family. And that got me started, but it wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. I began to really recognize that consciousness, even in those early days, fueled performance. And so that's really what kind of started me down the road. I was interested in physicality, but I'm an ectomorph. I am a huge vata. And so my mind moves far faster than my body. So I could never play organized sports. It's not my gig. It's not my bag. But I was a pretty decent runner. So I would run, distance. I was a cross country runner. And I injured myself very early on. And that got me interested in other forms of movement. And that got me down the road to yoga, of course.
Yeah. Okay, I want to pull on this theater thread because I have talked to a couple other people before. This may or may not surprise you, but I too did theater when I was younger. It's all part of, I actually found out later on that I enjoyed the public speaking aspect of it more than the theatricality of it. I don't particularly care to take on other characters, but I like being in front of people and speaking and connecting with a room in that way. Um, and I have this theory that there's an advantage to having some of that training before you come into the yoga space. Because I think, and not only just in the performative aspect of just not being afraid of being in front of people, but we know how to work with the energy of a room in a way that people who don't have that experience, you have to then teach them. You're nodding. Okay, so yes. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Rebecca. I because in my earliest formative years, I didn't understand how to read other people. What I think that gave me was the opportunity through artificial means, of course, right? Characters are not quote unquote real, but you begin to learn the process of reading something that's artificial so that when you get in the real world and organic facial expressions or bodily composition show up, you have a more easily understood way of saying, oh, I think I know what's happening in this other person across the
Yeah.
table or across the room from me. So I agree with you on that point.
Do you think that there is then how we respond as yoga professionals? So you're in the yoga therapy space, as am I. Like, do you feel like there is then we shift into a creative process to help sort of co-create something with our clients and students?
Well, maybe. I'm not sure where the theatricality component of that plays out, at least in my
Sure.
in my world, but um, being able to understand how someone's, I mean, it's cheap psychodynamics work, really, right? When you think about it,
Yeah.
we learned very early, okay, this facial expression might mean X, Y, or Z. So how should I embrace that? How should I work with that in order to be fully present to this other human being? Or, in group contexts as well, the same thing applies. I'm not sure if it's a 1-to-1 ratio though.
Okay. How do you find the creativity shifting into your yoga work, so to speak? Because you have so much background in sort of creative expression before coming into the yoga space. How did you find that like overlap? Did it just come
Mm-hmm.
naturally or did you have to, cultivate it a little bit?
Well, there are things about being a yoga teacher that you definitely have to cultivate. Uh, Learning all of the language, right?
Ooh, yeah.
Getting up to speed on that, and then organizing the aspects of sequencing a session, not just about posture, but about sequencing from beginning to the end. This is the pyramidal flow structure of how I want this session to go. And that will look very different from session to session, from person to person, as well as from day to day within yourself, right? Every teacher I've ever talked to will tell you that there are times when they're just not in the mood to teach. And yet, it's their job, it's their
Yeah.
profession, just like anything
Yeah.
else. And you get up and you do your job. So you've got to have a structure for yourself around presenting information that's accessible and people will understand it and hopefully find something of value before they leave.
There is a tension I find between the structure and the creative process. And I see some people lean heavily into one, say we're going to be complete. I feel like we've all been in that one class with the teacher who's just like, it's going to be jazz today. And you're like, none of this made sense. Like, I once was in a class where we had standing poses and then we lay down and then we stood back up. And I was like, absolutely not. It's not how this is going. Or people who are incredibly rigid, right? There's a huge structure on the other side. But that sweet spot in between those two things, I think, is where we play. And I'm curious how you experience that.
Yeah. So one of the ways I think I learned that in my own practice is because I love jazz music, right?
Me
And
too.
yeah, yeah, these commonalities they show up again and again and again, and I don't think it's accidental. I don't think it's coincidental. I think it's well, it might be a step too far to say it's a genetic encoding, but I really do believe that all human beings have this. We wouldn't have been on the planet this long if we weren't, by our very nature, creative. It
Mm.
takes a certain level of sophisticated
Yes,
creativity
yes.
when you don't have nails, you don't have particularly big fangs, and you're going to survive other animals that think you're lunch. You got to get really creative, right? And
Yeah.
so humans have, over the course of millennia, generation after generation, figured out, okay, fire. What will that allow me to do? Buttons. What will, create? I've gone way off topic, but to me, these are the essential ideas. If we reflectively look back on that in terms of yoga, for me specifically, I think one of the ways I kind of stumbled into it, maybe inadvertently or maybe on purpose, I'm not sure, is I was always interested in styles of yoga from the earliest practice that caused me to shift the way I thought first, right? And so any style of yoga can do that. So I
Yeah.
was most of us wind up doing this, right? I'm going to sample this particular yogic ice cream. Now I'm going to try another flavor of that
Yeah.
ice cream. So early on, I got certified at Kripalu. That's my alma mater of yoga. But I really dabbled in a lot of different practice, including, early on, of course, Ashtanga and Iyengar and Bikram and, all of the names. They came at their own time. I explored them. I found the pieces and the elements that felt like they had a home within me. And I'd like to think, even though I may not teach in any of those styles, I learned something valuable about them that allowed me to flavor a little bit of what I offer in my own work for people when I see that that would be useful for them. So that's the creativity, I think. You begin to say, oh, what's the stitch here that needs to come through for this particular group or this particular individual, or in this setting. Even sometimes it's about, I'm suddenly thinking about trying to teach yoga after 9/11, right? Which I
Yeah.
had to do. Many of us had to do, right? And that was like,
Yes.
how the heck do you teach people who are now angry or sad or frustrated, right, with the way the world is? And um, not to dwell necessarily on dark times, but I think currently today is one of those moments where yoga therapists, yoga teachers, and people who are in consciousness-based movement practices are called to do work that's a little bit different than other kinds of professions.
I'm really obsessed with this conversation. So let's keep going on that, because how do we meet that moment? I see that too. And I see those of us who are invested in social change work and who are shifting in those sorts of communities, who see what's going on and realize we have something that we can offer humans to help support the work of all of us. How do we meet that moment? How are you meeting
Mm,
that moment?
yeah. So, it's a somewhat bizarre question because not bizarre in the sense that it's a superfluous question or doesn't matter. It really does matter. But my teaching over the last, well, let's say at least the last 4 years has evolved quite radically. I'm not teaching in the public sphere anymore.
Oh,
I teach in a corporate environment for a pretty renowned wellness retreat center here in Southern California. And a lot of the things that I would have perhaps done in my private practice in Chicago, where I worked for about 22 years, something like that, in private practice for myself, have radically needed to shift, right?
yeah.
When you're working for someone else, you're not necessarily your own boss in the same way. So,
Yeah.
and I think this is also true even in the context of working for yourself. There are times when, as a yoga therapist working in private practice, I had to work with clients who were radically different than me, right? Even in Chicago, right there,
Yeah.
it's a melting pot. It's a mixed bag, and not everybody sees from the same perspective.
Yeah.
And that's the great, wonderful tension that I think that we can elevate in our work. We do that, I think, in one way by recognizing that whoever is in front of us has a nervous system that's not that radically different from us. So that's the universal through line.
Yeah.
My nervous system and your nervous system are essentially the same. And because they're essentially the same, we get to, most people think of, oh, I'm going to do my yoga practice and it's going to help me to self regulate. I think that might be maybe not the wrong way around, but the way around it is to recognize again that we learned evolutionarily by co-regulating first. We were in our
Yes.
mom's womb for 9 months, and she did all of that work for us. Thank goodness, all right? And then even beyond that, when we emerged, there was what, at least 7, 8 years where there was still a process of teaching us how to regulate ourselves that we might not have had the capacity for.
Yeah.
And so that's what a yoga therapist or yoga teacher or someone who's involved in consciousness-based movement is providing to other people.
If you're a yoga professional, whether you run a small studio, teach classes, or offer yoga therapy, and you're ready to grow your business, but aren't sure of the next step, I have a free resource just for you, my friends. Offering Tree's Studio Success Checklist is a proven roadmap designed to give you clarity. This isn't just for big studios. You can be a solo yoga therapist or launching a small community studio or focus on just selling specialized workshops. But this checklist simplifies everything. It covers tasks from creating a budget to building your class and offering schedule to planning and launching events. Plus, Working in Yoga listeners can still enjoy 50% off their first 3 months or 15% off your full first year on Offering Trees business software. Download the checklist and access your discount in the show notes or at offeringtree.com/working in yoga. That is a very, there's like 3 or 4 things I want to pull there, but one, like, I love that idea. You're right. Everybody in front of us has a similar nervous system to what we do. We can meet people on that level and then shift to meet them in the moment that they're at. I think that's very important. And I, like you, have done corporate work before, and it is a very different sort of animal than, private practice. I've also, contracted with the US military and other places where there are different expectations than what, we can pretty much do whatever we want in our own private practice and see whomever we want. And in those spaces, you don't quite have that flexibility. But I do think actually those times offered me the opportunity to almost be the most creative in my work. And I'm curious if you've had a similar experience.
Yes, absolutely. And I would have never guessed that would have been the case. So I
Nice.
came into this agency and I thought, okay, I'm going to teach yoga. And I ended up teaching meditation. And then from
Yeah.
meditation, I discovered, oh, well, there's a little niche here for sound journey or sound bathing, right? And so
Yeah.
I began to offer that. I had in my previous practice worked with sound, but never to the extent that I have in the last almost 2 years now. So this coming November will be the second full year of teaching a program that uses uh, multiple instruments, including throat singing, some the other things that I
Ooh.
do, right? Uh, in a amalgamated format so that people get to experience, I wouldn't necessarily call it healing sound, but sound as a way of resonating a kind of neural homeostasis is maybe a good way to put it.
Sure.
So, yeah.
I think I actually also agree that sound is a really nice sort of companion piece to the work that we do, even if we're not originally trained that way. If you're someone who is musically inclined in some way, I think that is a lovely pairing. I found that at my studio when I owned a studio. My most popular class was just called yoga and sound healing, and it was half gentle movement and it was half sound healing and music. And I had this amazing teacher. He would come in and he would always tell me, I'm gonna pare down the musical instruments that I brought. And then eventually he had like 4 gongs in the room and like 15 singing bowls. And I was just like, you're never parenting, you're just getting more stuff. And he'd just be like, well, it was very much a creative expression for him.
Yeah,
Do
yeah,
you,
I totally agree.
yeah,
Yeah. So I started with just singing bowls and I think tingsas, and now I've got 7 singing bowls, three tingsas, a hand pan, uh,
Yeah.
a ocean drum, and uh, uh, a gong. And I added a kalimba as well. And now I'm looking at, okay, well, could I add in a wind instrument? So I'm looking at a drone flute, just to see if it will work. I don't know that it will work. I mean, it's a very humble class, right? It's an hour
Yeah.
long, and I barely have enough time for everything I've got. But it's been a delight for me to just play and learn, um, through improvisation, by letting. So I've had musicians and physicists and really people who know way much more about musicality and music instruments than I do. I'm not a musician by any stretch of the imagination,
Sure.
but the things that they say to me are so fascinating. They're talking in musical notation and uh, about octaves, and I'm like, oh well, that's fascinating. I'm a meditator. I'm a meditation teacher. To me, this is about meditation, and I've got that piece down.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you're finding something else, but that's that's not my approach. It's not the perspective. And they look at me like, you're really strange. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely okay with that.
I feel like every yoga professional out there has had that moment where they're just like, you're really strange. I've had that too. People will come in the beginning of a class and they'll just be like, I don't really buy all this weird stuff that you're doing, but someone who they have respect for told them to come take the class. That's how it always works, right? I'm desperate. I don't know what else to do. My Aunt Sally said go see Rebecca, so now I'm here. And then they come at the end of class and they'll just be like, this really works, doesn't it? And I'm always
Yeah.
like, yeah, I have a real job. I do
Yeah.
a real thing. So for your music, I'm curious. Is it all improv? Do you prep in any way?
No, I do prep. I think playtime is my prep. So, like, maybe not as much now as I did early on, right? That's
Yeah.
typically the case with everything we
Yeah.
do. We do more upfront legwork and vocal work to get ourselves in a place where we can be comfortable with whatever shows up, right? That's how
Yep.
improvisation has always worked for me. Even when I'm teaching a sequence of postures, I might get into a class and realize, huh, I'm feeling another vibe here. I think I want to follow this and just see where it leads me. And hopefully, it's a bit of a friction point because you don't want to, when you're working with people who are paying you, they're paying you for a particular service.
Yeah.
You can't completely go AWOL, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and yet you do need some space to explore a little bit and recognize that your exploration and their exploration need to begin to synchronize some way. So I hope that answers your question.
I actually want to ask more about that because you're the first person on this series who's talked about there is again, so I have found that creativity inherently all there's a tension for so many different things that we're like balancing. And that expectation of what your clients or students want from you versus your offering to them, and also based on your skill set, knowledge, and understanding of what they have, there is a tension there that I think we have to creatively get around in a way that other professions don't. Like, if you're a dentist, the expectation is that you're doing something in their mouth and there's not really a whole lot of surprises. If they put something in your ear, you'd be like, that's that's a weird thing. But no one really knows what we do. And so when they come to you, and I'm thinking of a few clients in particular who would come and say, my low back hurts. And then you see all this other stuff. How do you deal with that tension creatively, right? Because we have to lead them down a path that they don't know they're walking.
Yeah. You're reminding me of, so I'm going to go back in time a little bit if that's okay, Rebecca. So
Of
right
course.
before a couple years before I left Chicago, and moved to the area I live now, I'm trying to remember. I think it was a fellow yoga teacher had referred this client to me. He had a traumatic brain injury
Okay.
and was, I think he, maybe it was 3 to 6 months since his injury. And so he couldn't walk. Uh, when I first met him, he could barely speak, to be really frank with you. And they said, "What do you think? Could you work with him?" And I thought,
Yeah.
I'm no, well, okay. I don't know. Let's give it a try. you know? And so I thought in the back of my head, all of my own stuff was coming up around, you're an imposter, you're not good enough, you don't know what you're doing, blah, 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 blah. And despite all of that, I said yes. And it turned out to be the most wonderful thing I probably could have done, not just for myself, but for him, quite frankly. By the time we were done, and obviously, anyone in the audience, please don't get this twisted. It wasn't only me. He had a care team of other competent healthcare providers and some other wellness coaches as well. But I would lead him initially with things that, his parents wanted to get him to walk again. And that was not something that I felt comfortable even contemplating when we first started. It was just to get him to feel his body. That's where we started. Can you feel your body move through space? Do you know where you are? Can you repeat my name some days, right?
Yeah.
Because as a result of the injury, he had some pretty severe memory problems. And so working from those, what we might call baby steps of recovery to where he was when we ended, able to walk, making jokes, usually at my expense, he's a big jokester, was where he wound up being. And that was through the process of creatively saying, okay, yoga didn't work because he can't do the poses. So I need to work on the breath, right? Oh, the breath is getting him into his body. Now I could add in this tool. Now I could add in another tool. And slowly over the course of time, that made a difference for him. And I began to see in my own work, oh, it's not, we say this as teachers all the time, right? It's not just about the asanas, but it's really not. It's about, it's about resonance. It's about connecting. And that was job number one, just getting that connection with him so that he understood, I'm not your doctor. I'm not your nurse. I'm not your PT, but I'm also not your friend right now. Right? I'm going to help you, but it has to look a certain way with some variance, right? So we can crack some jokes, and I want you to think about moving your toe. I want you to really focus on that right now.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I think it's very important that you said that it's not just about the asana, which we've said for years, especially in certain circles in the yoga space. We've been shouting at the top of our lungs, hey, do something more than asana. But now we're facing the fact that tech will be better at an asana sequence than we will. So it is about the other things. There's no tech that's going to teach you how to be embodied the way a human connecting and co-regulating with another human will be able to help support that experience. So I love that you said that, because I think that's so poignant now more than ever as our jobs shift and change in the modern sort of, post AI space, shall we say.
Yeah, I could not agree more. It's one of the reasons for why I specifically have kind of, not that I don't call myself a yoga therapist, because I do, but to me, it's not the consciousness-based movement education makes so much sense, not only because, I'm a somatic educator, as well as a Tai Chi teacher, as well, as well as a Buto style dancer. So I've got a lot of different forms and modalities that I can work with, but it's at the crux of it at the base, it is about not just movement for movement's sake, right? I'm not
Yep.
teaching basketball. Nothing wrong
Right.
with basketball, and I'm sure there's consciousness around that. But when I use that word, I mean something very specific, and I think that language begins to cue people. Oh, wait, he's doing something a little bit different with the kinds of movement he's approaching.
Yeah, I think that's something I've had in my head for a very long time because I will often run into yoga professionals who they themselves don't have a actual yoga practice, right? They're just teaching, but they don't have the practice. And I hear them often say, oh, things like, oh, swimming is my yoga, or oh, riding a horse is my yoga, or oh, running is my yoga. And I'm like, no, we are not the only movement modality that holds the patent on sort of, revelatory experiences based on movement. We do something different. There's a very different thing that happens here. And you're right. There are lots of different, I think most of us have other movement modalities that we've pulled in because, to be frank, there are other movement modalities that are better than us. Like, plenty. Read anything by Feldenkrais and you'd be like, oh, wow, this guy was way smarter than we were. But we're doing something else. The point of it is different. Do you find that too?
Yeah, that's where I'm trying to get to with this consciousness base, because I think that is the kernel that makes the kinds of, is not purely about physical movement, it's about movement of the mind,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
so if you wed those two together, that okay, well, maybe yoga and horseback riding have a kind of consciousness base to them, but it ain't the same thing as
No.
what we were talking about in the original scriptures of yoga, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is remarkably different, I think. So I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, you just can't, like, look, runner's high isn't yoga. You can feel high, sure. And we sometimes come out feeling euphoric from our movement practices as well. But there's just, what do you think that element is? There's that element, that uh, yogic element that makes us us. Do you have words for that? I maybe do.
Wow, that's interesting. What could you say that? Say that again.
What is the element within our experiences, especially in movement, that makes us yoga versus people who will say, my yoga is when I get in the pool and swim laps? And I feel, I can feel my brain focus and my body move and coordinated. I mean, my instinct is to say there is this piece of lifestyle that those other modalities don't have. What I would say, the yamas, the niyamas, like that part is so distinctly us because no swim coach is like, look, you shouldn't lie to people.
Yeah, I think that's a part of it. And I'm in my mind, I'm wondering about, like, oh, good Lord, I always terribly mispronounce the guy's name, the flow state, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Sure, yes.
Yeah. The flow state is, at least in my mind, synonymous with what you might be talking about. And yet, when people talk about their flow state experiences of runner's high or playing basketball or swimming the English, all the things that can get
Yeah.
you into a similar kind of samadhi like expression, I think the distinction for me is that when I'm there fleetingly, I don't have a sense of me and you anymore. And I don't know that that's necessarily the case with those other aspects,
Ooh, that's
right?
a
Does that make
really good.
sense?
Yes, that's an excellent answer. There is, well, what are we going to call that? Because I agree with you. There is that sort of, like, as Rumi would say, meeting you beyond the field of me and you. Beyond that experience, there's a field and I'll meet you there. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's us. Ooh,
Yeah, I think that gets closer to what we're trying to put words around, which,
It's
even
hard.
using the word samadhi doesn't,
Yeah, yeah,
that it's an old word, and most people are like, what is that word? Okay,
yeah,
don't worry about it. Absorption, right?
yeah.
Absorption into something that's beyond me, but also to a certain degree, not beyond me.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, it's a both and, which I think is
Yeah.
something that yoga actually is very good at in our practice. Like in that sort of creative process of us being present with our students and our clients, we get to provide them a both and experience. I became really obsessed with this concept for a while. Like I was trying to find asana that felt like a both and. Like in Virabhadrasana 1, is your body going up or is it going down? Can you experience both things at the same time? And can we take that concept into real life where you can be really mad at somebody but also love them? Like it's
Mhm.
is your breath cool or warm? It's a both and. And that in a way, I think that also is us. We contain multitudes, so to speak. Yeah, and we get to teach
Yeah.
people that. That's really cool. Great
Yeah.
job, Per.
Yeah. Well, see, here's the thing. When you so I started in yoga, but I had, you know, at least 15 solid years of Christianity as my background, right? I was raised Roman
Same.
Catholic. And
Oh,
so there,
same.
yeah, yeah. So all of that bubbles up at times as well. And then, because viewers can't see me, I am a man of color. And, my ethnic identity is also a part of this because, there are Africanized traditions that talk about this idea of that tension we're talking about.
Yeah.
And it's in that reference, it's called diunital logic. So rather than saying, my breath is cold or my breath is hot, and it's either or, it's both, and I'm going to hold that tension
Yeah.
between the two. I'm not going to try to resolve that tension. That's where creativity comes in, to hold
Yes.
that tension and let that tension play through, because you don't know where it's going to go, right? It's a little bit of
Yeah.
improv, which is also part of my background as well. Uh, Improv. Because in improv, you never say no, right? It's
Yes.
always
It's always a
yes
yes
and,
and yeah.
yes and that's that. This is the crux of diurnal logic. It's both day and night, and I'm going to hold this dynamic tension between these two so that they don't have to fight anymore. There's space for both of them, but that's really, really hard in the phenomenal world to come by, and perhaps even more difficult in the human mind. Or I'll speak for my human mind, but that's what I'm here to do this lifetime.
Yeah. My mind as well. So here's my question to you. Let's say we've got listeners out there who are excited to explore this kind of creative tension that we've been talking about for our conversation here. Um, where do you start without feeling lost?
Hmm. I thought that question might come up, and I didn't really have an answer for it. I guess where I start, perhaps, because I don't know that there's one size shoe that will fit everyone, but
Yeah.
I suspect that for many of us, what I noticed about my own experience is the reason I might have been so anxious as a kid is I was a little disembodied at a very early age. And so theater gave me the opportunity to centrate my body. And so that's where I like to think about creativity starting from. So asana can do that, breathing into the body can do that. Some of the more esoteric aspects of tantra in specific
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
really, really excellent at doing that work as well. But for me, starting with the physical body is a really wonderful place to start, I think.
I agree with you. And I think that as you start the creative process, there is a level of discomfort in the not knowing. And like getting into your physical body can somewhat alleviate a little bit of that discomfort. It's still there, but we've figured out how to channel that discomfort in a way that feels manageable until you get used to it. Because at some point when I asked you that question, my brain is like, oh, the answer is you just have to get lost and be excited about being lost. And then I was like, oh, but that sucks. It does suck at the
Yeah,
beginning. It's hard.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So not knowing where we have this, we, I remember certain times of thinking, okay, well, if I plan every asana that I want to teach from the beginning to the end of this 90-minute or 65-minute class or 75
Yeah.
minute class, whatever it is, then I'll be safe. After cramps in my hand, I realized very quickly you can't write that out. Even if you do write it out, it won't work. It just, for me at least, I don't know about anybody else. So I am awestruck often by teachers who can do it that way because it just never ever worked for me. I would write out an entire script and then look at it and then try to do it right like we do and then realize, oh
Yeah.
wait, I forgot something, or I I zigged when I should have zagged here, and now the only way to get back online is to freeform,
Yeah.
right? And so having that it's going to be okay if I put one foot after the next, or one
Yeah.
sentence after the next, or one thought after the next one
Yeah.
will get me exactly where I need to be.
I think that's a great piece of advice for yoga teachers who are looking to shift into that more, either be it one-on-one or a therapeutic yoga sort of experience, is once you get good at doing that with a class, because there's a little bit of comfort in the fact that there's a group of people so they can kind of co-regulate off each other while you stumble through figuring it out because you forgot your book. I think we all had that moment. We wrote it out, then we forgot the book and we're like, uh-oh. What happens now? But when you get good at that, then it becomes the experience of truly being present and responding with the people who are in front of you. And that's where creativity kind of jumps off, I think.
Yeah, and then it's more natural and more authentic. And I feel like today when I'm called to teach a class, um, yes, I've got a gazillion scripts in my head that I know I could use, but none of them are worth a darn if the person in front of me doesn't need that, right? So I always start by trying to figure out what did they come from? What is it? So a big part of my role in this corporation I work for, this wellness corporation, is to actually act as a mindset coach, right? About behavioral health and well-being. And in that context, my goal is to figure out what is it you think you need, not to tell them what they want. Oh, wait, take two trichinasanas and one down dog and call me in the morning, right? That's not
Yeah.
the idea, right? Now, that might very well be where I started, you know, almost 30 something years ago as a
Yeah.
yoga
Yeah.
teacher. But today, if I did that, I would think, oh, you're just phoning it in. Kid, do something real here, be
Yeah.
authentic.
Yeah.
So, in that context, I'm going to ask, what'd you have for breakfast? What do you think you need? And then based on our conversation, and we're probably going to have a running conversation during, this is one of the things my students often said to me, even before I came into this kind of role. Per, for someone who's so shy, because I'm really an introvert. If you really know me, I'm an introvert. You talk a lot. You talk a lot. And the reason I do is because I want to know more about you so that I can apply it to
Yeah.
this ongoing rolling physical conversation we're having through consciousness, right?
Yeah. Per, will you tell everybody where to find you if they want to now become obsessed with you and all the work that you're doing?
Well, it's again a bit of a loaded conversation because you really can't find me anymore at this point. I'm not seeing private clients currently. And I don't teach in the world here in Southern California. I'm for the last couple of years, I've been working on a book though. And so that might be something that
Tell us
will
about your book.
hopefully eventually get published in the real world. The book is, what is the book about? It's a personal journey about all of the disciplines that I've studied and had an interest in, and how creatively, I think they have allowed me to expand my perspective on using modalities and disciplines such as yoga and yoga therapy, certainly,
Yeah.
but not exclusively to those, to think about working on expanding human consciousness and human potential. So that's the purpose of the work. And it's called Attending to the Self. But I don't quite yet have a publisher lined up. So maybe I shouldn't have even said that, but I'm going to put it out there.
We're going to put it out there.
Yeah.
Shambhala's going to hear it, and they're going to call you. Thank you so much for this conversation.
It has truly been my pleasure. I've seen you out on the interwebs for quite a long time, and I thought, oh, what is she about? What's that? And then, I don't know. I guess it was, I don't know. I listened on in my phone to one of your podcasts a while back, and I thought, oh, she really knows what she's doing. And then you came up with this idea of creativity. And I thought, oh, I got to reach out to her. So I'm really glad I did. And I'm so glad you said yes. Thank you.
I am so glad. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this incredibly lovely conversation, Per. Here are our key takeaways. First, so there is this perception, a perception that I said in the intro, I once had as well, that creative people are naturally creative, no assembly required. But this is simply not true. Creativity is cultivated through practice and choice, like any other skill set. So if you've been listening to this series and thinking, wow, well, these people are way more creative than I am, let me tell you, creativity has a whole lot in common with the skill of being good at remembering names. It's a choice, and one that you practice or cultivate every single day. Next, oh my gosh, when Per talked about trying out various styles of yoga in search for that mindset shift, well, same. I was also looking for a shift in my own perspective, and I think a lot of us were. And some of that curiosity, I think, also fuels us as creative individuals. So consider that same inner drive that you once had, once upon a time, to think about and find a yoga class as a solution to whatever you were trying to shift, as also the same inner drive that can shift you to become more creative in your teaching. Next, this conversation with Per really had me diving deep in my own mind on a topic that has recently had me curious to explore. There's this tension between our own internal experiences and our desire to change ourselves and our lives, creatively or not, and the experience that we have out in the collective world, and the powers that hold great influence over our everyday. I think this is creative work too, the work of living in a world that requires from us both and, if you will. We are both doing internal work and experiencing external pressures of which we have no control. And yoga helps with that. Honestly, our work is amazing, you guys. It is wild to think that we get the opportunity to support other people through this experience as well. Next, we don't hold a patent on transcendental movement experiences. While it is important that we have the skills to lead people through movement practices safely, it's equally as important that we use the entire scope of yoga to introduce our students and clients to the full yoga experience. And finally, I just need to say that sometimes life is a yes and situation, like an improv class. Sometimes your yoga business is a yes and situation. I know that we're not supposed to say yes to everything in our businesses, but what if we decided that our businesses and our teaching was like the practice of improv? Try it for a week or a month and see if yes and allows you to be open to creating something new. Okay, next week on the podcast is marketing maven Kiki Burke talking about how we can be more creative in our marketing for our yoga businesses. Until then, my friends, I am so grateful that you are here spending your time with me today. Let's go get to work and I'll catch you around the water cooler next time.